There is a photograph of me on my wedding day. I am standing in the yard outside my parents' farmhouse. It is mid-morning, October, and the light is doing what October light does, coming in flat and gold and clean, the kind of light that makes everything look more beautiful and more final than it actually is. I am wearing my blue dress and my white apron, and my prayer cap is pinned straight, and I am smiling. It is a real smile. I want you to understand that. It is not a performance. It is not the polite, teeth-hidden smile that Amish women practice for strangers. It is the wide, unguarded kind, the kind that comes from somewhere below calculation, somewhere the body hasn't caught up with yet. The woman who took the photograph, my mother's sister, said, "Oh, you look so happy." And I was. And underneath the happiness, in a layer so deep and so well-trained that I had almost stopped being aware of it, I was the most terrified I had ever been in my 17 years of living. Both things were completely true. I did not know, standing in that gold October light, that this was the thing no one would ever explain to me. Not before the wedding, not after it, not for years. That you can be genuinely, wholeheartedly happy and secretly, silently terrified at the exact same moment. That one does not cancel the other. That the smile on your face can be entirely real while something underneath it is screaming in a language you have not been given words for. That photograph still exists, somewhere, in a box in a house I no longer live in. And I have thought about the girl in it almost every day since I left. My name is Rebecca. I grew up Old Order Amish in Holmes County, Ohio, and I left the community 5 years ago. This channel, Beyond the Bonnet, is where I give language to the things that were kept from me. Not to hurt anyone, not to perform suffering for strangers on the internet, but because the girl in that photograph deserved words. And because somewhere, right now, there is another girl in another photograph, and she deserves words too, before it is too late for them to help her. If you want honest, unfiltered stories from behind the bonnet, subscribe, and give this video a like. It costs 2 seconds and it tells YouTube that this story is worth being heard. And in the comments, I want to ask you something. Have you ever smiled through something you were terrified of? Have you ever performed happiness so completely that the performance and the feeling became impossible to separate? Leave me your answer, even just yes. I will read every single one. Now let me tell you what was underneath the smile. An Amish wedding is one of the most genuinely beautiful things I have ever witnessed. I want to say that first, without qualification, because I think it matters. The beauty is not a performance. It is not a veneer over something hollow. The community that comes together for a wedding, 300 people who have known each other for generations, who have sat together in worship and worked together in harvest and carried each other's grief and celebrated each other's children. That community is real. The love in the room is real. The food, the singing, the particular atmosphere of a full farmhouse in October with the cold outside and the warmth inside. All of it is genuinely beautiful. And inside that genuine beauty, there are 3 things that every Amish bride carries that the guests in the room cannot see. The first thing she carries, the requirement of visible joy. An Amish bride is not permitted, in any informal or formal sense, to appear anything other than radiant. Not because anyone has told her directly, "You must smile," but because the community has celebrated this day for months. The women have cooked for days. The men have moved benches and arranged tables. 300 people have come from across the district to witness this. A bride who looks uncertain, or pale, or quietly frightened, a bride whose face tells a more complicated story than the occasion demands, is felt as a kind of ingratitude. A failure of the appropriate feeling. And Amish girls are trained, from the time they can understand expressions, to produce the appropriate feeling on demand. The smile is not fake, but it is also not entirely free. The second thing she carries, a body full of questions she was never allowed to ask. The education that Amish girls receive about marriage and their bodies before their wedding night is almost entirely absent. 3 words at a singing, a sermon about yielding. That is the curriculum. And so a bride stands at her wedding in genuine joy, while her body carries a question she cannot fully form. A question about what the night will bring, and she has no language to answer it, and nowhere to put it. The only thing to do with a question you cannot form and cannot ask is to smile and keep moving. The third thing she carries, the knowledge that the terror is hers alone. Because a bride who is frightened could, theoretically, speak. She could find a moment and pull her mother aside and say, "I am afraid. Tell me what to expect." She does not do this, not because she doesn't want to, but because she knows, with the kind of knowing that lives in the body, not the mind, that this question would be received as a failure of faith. That visible terror is a spiritual problem. That the correct response to not knowing what is coming is not preparation or honesty, but faith. Expressed, visibly, on the face, for 300 witnesses. And so she smiles. And the terror lives in the same body as the joy. And she carries both of them, alone, through the most witnessed day of her life. There is a moment in an Amish wedding reception that happens in the late afternoon, when the main meal is finished, and the community is still gathered, and the singing has been going for hours, and the light outside is starting to drop. It is the moment when the bride knows the day is beginning to end. For me, that moment came at around 4 o'clock. The singing was still full, the men's voices and the women's voices layering over each other the way they do in slow German hymns, building and settling, building and settling. The kitchen was warm from the cooking and the bodies. My face hurt from smiling. My mother came to stand beside me for a moment. Just beside me, not touching, watching the room. She smelled like the kitchen, roast and coffee, and the particular scent of a woman who has been working since before dawn. She was proud. I could feel the pride coming off her like warmth. She leaned close and said quietly, "Everything is so beautiful." And I said, "Yes, Mama, it is." And that was the entire conversation. What I did not say, what was alive in my chest at that exact moment with a specificity I can still locate if I reach for it. I don't know what tonight will be. I have no idea what is going to happen to me in a few hours, and no one has ever told me, and I don't know how to ask, and I am happy, and I am so frightened, and I don't know how to carry both of these at once without one of them killing the other. That was the sentence that lived behind, "Yes, Mama, it is." The singing kept going. The light kept dropping. Samuel came to stand near me after a while. He was calm. He was always calm. His calm, I had decided over the course of our courtship, was one of the things I admired most about him. I did not know yet that his calm was the same performance mine was. That underneath it, he was carrying an almost identical weight. The same blankness where information should have been. The same vast, unanswered space about what a husband was supposed to do and know on a wedding night, given nothing to fill it with except authority and the instruction to lead. 2 people, side by side, dressed in their finest, each performing certainty for the benefit of the other. The singing ended. The guests began, slowly, the long process of leaving. I stood in my parents' yard in the last of the October light and watched them go, one by one, family by family, buggy by buggy, until the yard was quiet and the windows of the farmhouse were lit from inside, and Samuel was standing at the door, waiting. The smile was still on my face. I did not know how to take it off. 2 years after my own wedding, I attended the wedding of a girl I had grown up beside. I will call her Anna. Anna was 19. Her groom was 23. The wedding was in May, different light than October, softer, more forgiving. Anna was radiant in the truest possible sense. The kind of bride that people kept stopping to look at, not because anything about her appearance was remarkable, but because her happiness was so fully present in her face that it was impossible not to look. I watched her through the ceremony, through the singing, through the meal. And at some point in the afternoon, I found myself watching her face with a feeling I had not expected. I was looking for it. The thing underneath. The layer beneath the radiance that I now knew how to recognize. Not from watching faces, but from having carried it myself. The particular set of the jaw that is holding something. The eyes that are present in the room, but also somewhere else, somewhere interior, somewhere no one in the room has been invited. I found it. It was there. Of course it was there. In one unguarded moment, when the singing had paused and the room was reorganizing itself around the next hymn, Anna's face went still for just a second. Not sad, not visibly frightened, just underneath. The layer beneath the radiance, visible for 2 seconds before she caught herself and brought the smile back. I wanted to cross the room and take her hand. I didn't. Because I didn't have the words yet. Because I was only 2 years out of my own wedding night. What I knew then could not have helped her. What I knew then was only that the terror was real and that it could coexist with the happiness and that neither one canceled the other. What I did not yet know was what to do about it. I watched Anna leave with her husband that evening, in a buggy decorated with tin cans and ribbon. She was smiling. I hope, with everything I am, that her night was gentler than mine. There is a phenomenon that my therapist described to me in our second year of working together. She called it somatic containment, the body's way of holding what the mind has no language for. I had been describing the afternoon of my wedding, the 4 o'clock light, the conversation with my mother, the sentence I didn't say. And she asked me something she often asked. Where did you feel it in your body? I knew immediately. I had been feeling it so vividly as I spoke that I almost thought she could see it. In my chest, I said, like something was pressing in from both sides at once. She nodded. She said, when we experience an emotion that we cannot express and cannot name, when the feeling has no language and no sanctioned outlet, the body doesn't discard it. It stores it. It packages it in tissue and muscle and breath, and it keeps it, sometimes for years, waiting for a moment when it becomes safe to let it out. This is what happened to you every time you smiled through something you were terrified of. Your body was storing what your face was required to deny. I sat with that for a long time. Then I said, so where does it go? She said, sometimes it comes out sideways. In anger that seems disproportionate, in physical tension you can't explain, in a grief that arrives years later in a therapist's office when you finally have the language for what you were carrying. She looked at me. Sometimes, she said, it comes out in a video you record for strangers on the internet, because the strangers are safer than the room you were standing in, because the strangers don't require the smile. I did not expect to cry in that session. I had thought we were having an intellectual conversation. The body, it turns out, knows the difference. I want to be careful here, because this is the part where it would be easy to be reductive. Easy to say, the community is cruel, and the cruelty is the smiling, and the people who required the smile are the villains. But that is not what I believe, and I will not say it. What I believe is more uncomfortable than that. The smile was required by a community that genuinely loved its brides. The mothers who had cooked for days wanted their daughters to be happy. They were not staging a performance of happiness over someone's private suffering. They were creating the conditions under which they believed happiness was possible. A good marriage, a faithful husband, a community of support, a God who would carry what they couldn't. They were giving everything they had. And part of what they had, part of what had been given to them, and to their mothers, and to their mothers' mothers, was the belief that a woman who expressed fear on her wedding day was failing to trust God. That visible terror was a spiritual problem. That the correct response to not knowing what was coming was not preparation or conversation or honesty, but faith, expressed visibly on the face, for 300 witnesses. The smile was not cruelty. The smile was theology, but here is what theology does not change. A 17-year-old girl stood in her parents' yard in October with something pressing in her chest from both sides at once, and not a single adult in her world gave her permission to say so. She carried that unnamed thing into the most significant night of her life and processed it completely alone, because she had been taught, in 100 small and sincere and loving ways, that her fear was not the point. Her faith was the point. Her fear was her own business. And so she smiled. The smile was genuine, and it was also a cage made entirely of love. And I have spent 5 years learning how to say that both of those things are true at once. The photograph still exists somewhere. A girl in a blue dress in October light, smiling with everything she had. I have not seen it in 5 years, but I think about it often. And when I do, I feel something I did not expect to feel when I started talking about all of this publicly. I feel tenderness toward her, not pity. Tenderness, which is different. Pity looks down. Tenderness looks across, at eye level, at someone who was doing exactly what she could with exactly what she had been given. She had been given a community that loved her, a faith that sustained her, a groom who was, in his own way, equally unprepared and equally sincere. A wedding of genuine beauty. 300 people who showed up because she mattered. What she had not been given was language. And you can love someone very completely and still fail to give them the language they need. The women who did not prepare me loved me. My mother, standing beside me in the kitchen at 4 o'clock, was expressing love. My aunt, who said I looked happy, was expressing love. The bishop, who filled the ceremony with instruction about yielding, believed he was giving me a framework that would sustain my marriage. All of it was love. None of it was enough. And I have made my peace, slowly and imperfectly, with the fact that love without language is still love. It just leaves you alone in a way that love is not supposed to leave you. There is a photograph of me on my wedding day. I am smiling. I want you to know something about that girl. She was not performing. She was not a victim who didn't know she was a victim, or not only that. She was genuinely, wholeheartedly happy to be beginning her life. She loved her community. She loved the October light. She loved the singing and the feeling of 300 people gathered around her. And she was terrified. And she had nowhere to put the terror, and no one gave her a place. If you are watching this and you know that photograph, not mine specifically, but the one from your own life, the smile that was real, and the thing underneath it that was also real. The happiness you performed so completely, you lost track of where the performance ended and you began. The feeling you carried alone into the most significant night of your life because you had been given no other option. I see you. Not the smile. You. The thing underneath the smile that needed language and was never given any. The question you couldn't form. The conversation you needed and didn't know how to start. The terror that lived in the same body as the joy and never got to exist out loud. I see that. And I want to say clearly to that part of you, you were not wrong to be afraid. You were not failing in faith. You were not ungrateful or immodest or spiritually deficient. You were a human being walking into something significant without the tools to walk into it. And the smile you wore was the most resourceful thing you knew how to do with what you had been given. That was enough. You were enough. You just deserved more. Leave me a comment. Tell me, have you ever smiled through something that terrified you? Have you ever carried a fear so completely alone that you stopped being able to tell it apart from strength? Just tell me yes. Or tell me more. I will read it all. Subscribe to Beyond the Bonnet if you want more stories like this one. Every week, more language for the things that were kept from us. We are not done. Until next time. The smile was real. So was everything underneath it. Choose your freedoms wisely. They might just save your life.